Good afternoon. Before I start my presentation, I'd like to ask one quick question to the audience, and more specifically, the traders and the suppliers in the audience. What challenges do you face in the current economy today? If you could just throw in a few keywords, shout them out, or I think there's a microphone going around, that would be great. Some challenges that you're facing in today's economy. And I'm going to write your answers down. Any challenges? No challenges at all? Delays in payment, thank you. Anything else? Pricing pressure? Exchange rates. Sorry, I didn't get that. Competition. Political and terms and conditions.
Terms and conditions.
Yep, I heard that. Sorry? Erratic project and practices. One more? Lack of regulations. Okay. Now let's bank that on the side for now. I'll get back to that later. Today, I would like to talk to you about a topic that's very subjective, where there's very limited data available out there, but is nonetheless fundamental to our understanding of the market. So there's very little, if any, information about customer sentiment in the market. So NFT took it upon itself to run its own research study. We ran two types of survey, quantitative and qualitative. The one I'll be presenting to you today is the qualitative survey, which we did through in-depth interviews that we conducted with 32 opinion leaders. These are the heads of procurement in the industry's top contracting firms. The study was conducted in 2016, but you will see that the information is very much still relevant today. You can't talk about customer sentiment without talking first about the industry as a whole. Not to step on any of what David Lee said, but just to complement a lot of the numbers he shared. Growth in the construction market in the Middle East and North Africa region slowed down in 2017 to 1.6%. But it's seeing recovery in 2018 with a 4.9% growth. And again, we'll be gaining momentum from 2019 to 2022 with an average growth rate oscillating between 6 to 7%. This is owed to governments that intend to have the private sector supporting the provision of costly, traditionally government projects through the use of public-private partnerships, or PPP, build, operate, transfer, BOT, and other financial models that are intended to boost the activity. Let's look at Saudi real quick. Saudi's expected average growth of 2.6% between 2018 and 2022 is owed to a government that is pushing for very ambitious construction projects. These projects are in partnership between the state, and overseas firms. Just to name a few big projects, we have the Qidaya project, which is valued at $40 billion, which is going to be an entertainment city. We have the Neom City project, which is going to be valued at $500 billion. Also, the government has recently announced that it plans to start building 2 nuclear power plants by the end of 2018 and 16 more over the next 25 years. The plan is to provide 15% of Saudi Arabia's power through nuclear by 2032. The UAE, on the other hand, construction is a key driver of the UAE economy and is the second largest after Saudi Arabia. With Expo 2020 coming closer, Dubai's Roads and Transport Authority has developed many new roads, and a lot will be completed by 2018. Recently, the UAE and China have signed 13 agreements to counter trade wars, and Amar Properties is planning on building the largest Chinatown in the Middle East right here in the UAE. Abu Dhabi has launched a $5.4 billion plan, economic plan, called Ghadan 21, or Tomorrow 21, which is basically a plan that is intended to revive the real estate, renewable energy, infrastructure. The 3-year economic plan is heavily supported by the government, and its objective is to increase the competitiveness of the emirate. So all this research looks rather positive. Is this sentiment shared by our customers, our contractors? When we asked our customers where they stand in terms of their outlook for the market, there's 2 schools of thoughts. 90% said they're very optimistic about the future, and 10% said they're very pessimistic. Now, you're probably thinking 90%, that's a very big number, because that was our initial reaction. But it's important here to note 2 things. First of all, this survey was ran in 2015, 2016, where the economy was slowly recovering. 2014 was a good year. And also the second thing to notice is that the 90% also include contractors who are a little bit in between, but are leaning more towards the optimistic side. The 10% are the very, very pessimistic, and they believe that the good days are over and the economy is not going to recover. So, what are those 90% optimistic about? What are the drivers of the economy? Of course, Expo 2020 seems to be the primary driver of the economy in the UAE. And we'll talk more about that later. We also asked respondents to name the markets where they see the most potential. So North Africa and Syria, once politically stable, will see a lot of potential for reconstruction. KSA, as I said in my previous slide, is looking very promising. Now, it's important here to note that this is in the opinion of the contractors and the customers, not what third-party statistics are saying. This is from their words. For the UAE, contractors believe that Abu Dhabi and Al Quwain are looking promising in the next few years. Kuwait as well is expected to invest heavily in construction. And in retrospect today, we can say that this is actually very much true. The country has been running on surplus for a few years now and has invested a lot in construction. And India and Asia Pacific are looking to be potential export markets for this segment of customers. Being a tower crane supplier, we had to ask our customers what model of tower crane do they believe will be the future. And the majority said that the luffing tower crane is going to be the model of choice in the future. Looking at the pessimistic 9%, what are their challenges? Why have they given up hope? And we've asked, now it's important here to know that, of course, these challenges are mentioned by both segments of the market. But the difference is that the optimistic bunch believe that the economy will recover despite these challenges, whereas the pessimistic segment believe that these challenges basically are the reason why they've given up hope and there is no chance for recovery. So profit margins are low, and this is because of increased cost of equipment and lower revenues. I attended a roundtable organized by the BNC network, and we were basically discussing where did it all go wrong, what happened. And one CEO said something that was very interesting. He said that the problem is not cash flow, and it's not payment terms. The problem is that contractors are bidding projects at almost at cost. And then when the project begins, there are so many unaccounted for costs that accumulate over the years that render the project unprofitable. Sorry. Also, another challenge was the duration of the projects. Projects are taking longer and longer to complete because, of course, again, delayed cash flows. And so this has impacted negatively the project's profitability. Another challenge is competition. Competition for projects that are posing to be a burden for second-tier contractors who were normally bidding for smaller projects without the interference of bigger contracting firms. But now big contracting firms are also bidding for these smaller projects, so leaving the second-level contractor very squeezed. And another problem is the elevated cost of doing business. Last year, most contractors had to invest in health insurance for their workers, among other unaccounted for costs. So construction companies are running their business already on a very slow margin, 3 to 5%. So any extra cost is just going to make things more difficult for them. Now, when I first started the presentation, I asked you to name a few challenges that you're facing as a supplier and as a trader. And the challenges that you're facing are delayed payments, pricing issues, competition, political instabilities, terms and conditions, etc. A lot of what you said has been echoed by our customers as well. So technically, we're all on the same boat. We're all sharing the same outlook. And it's just the same across the entire supply chain. Where do we go from there? I'll leave that thought with you. So let's dig deep into the buying behavior. When asked these opinion leaders, how do they buy? How do they buy tower cranes, construction hoist, heavy equipment? 4 major trends emerged. First, rent versus purchase. 50% of our customers have strictly moved away from rental and are focusing on purchase. Mirroring this, NFT has changed its business model, whereby today we have 80% of our tower cranes on hire and only 20% are on sale in the GCC. Another trend is training. There has been a lot of emphasis on hiring qualified staff and training existing staff in job development in order to increase efficiency, and the focus is mainly on safety. The rise of the used equipment. Used equipment is on the rise over the past few years, and a lot of customers are moving away from brand new equipment and focusing on just second-hand equipment. 40% of our customers are now just choosing used equipment and are not even considering brand new. It's because of the price-sensitive model. There's less risk with used equipment. Customers are risk-aversive, and they're making decisions based on a project-to-project basis. The tower crane, in our case, is just considered as an expense. It's no longer considered an asset or an investment. However, some light at the end of the tunnel for manufacturers. There is a growing demand for brand new equipment. 30% of our customers are looking into replacing their older tower cranes with brand new ones for obvious reasons like breakdowns, maintenance, capacity change. NFT runs a blog, and we publish articles 2 times a month. Recently, we published an article about the decision. When do you replace and when do you fix your equipment, your tower crane more specifically? And that article was very popular amongst our customers. We got a lot of requests to send out a team to investigate fleet in order to help customers through this transition, through that decision. When do you replace and when do you fix? So we asked them, What is the #1 factor for decision making? And no surprise there, price was ranked as the #1 factor when deciding to purchase or to hire tower cranes or construction hoists. We asked them to rank among 10 different factors, and price was ranked #1. It seems that the market is price sensitive, and the main driver behind decision making is price. So price is #1, quality is #2, safety, sadly, #3. After-sale services came 4th, and availability of spare parts, 5, flexibility, availability of equipment, reputation of the supplier came at 8, commercial flexibility, and financial flexibility all the way at the end. So going back to my 4th slide, when I said that the main driver that has been unanimously cited by all our respondents was Expo 2020, it's worth investigating, looking deeper into the Expo 2020. What is the sentiment in the market around this major event? What's going to happen after? So let's look at that a little bit deeper now. Just to give you some perspective, so far 243,000 meter of concrete has been poured. 20,000 workers are currently on site at the Expo. $2.9 billion value of projects have been awarded. 4.3 kilometers squared is the area of the Expo site, and 45 tower cranes are currently standing tall on the Expo 2020 sites. Here to dig deeper into the requirements of the Expo from the customer's perspective is my colleague Nawar.
Good afternoon. So I want to talk to you a little bit about my experience in Expo so far and the projects related to Expo sites. And you will note that in this picture we have showed our 6 tower cranes working in the precast yard, which are prefabricated elements for the Route 2020, which will give metro access from Dubai all the way to the Expo 2020 site. Here also we have another picture of a residential project which is currently rising in Expo 2020, so that in the long term, Expo 2020 will have a ready-built community of over 700,000 residents, which can accommodate that much. And it is the plan to repurpose the Expo 2020 into what will be called in the future District 2020. And this is to avoid the regrets of such worldwide expositions such as the Olympics in Brazil, where today they have these beautiful architectural projects which are left rotting and not being used. And the key focus here for the Expo is to have a legacy and to be able to use some of the structures which will be allowed for example, the UAE pavilion will remain, and Al Wasl Dome, which we will see in a picture later, that can hold a park and will have a theater and exhibition space, as well as the sustainability pavilion, which is currently being built, will also host the children and scientific research for education. I skipped one. So, as a salesman, I think everybody here is keen to always approach projects at an early stage. And we have a challenge because a lot of times the sites are restricted. In most cases in the UAE, you can enter any site at will. All you have to do is put down your number, and at 5 minutes you're sitting down with the decision maker or the project manager. I learned the hard way that that was not the case in Expo 2020 2 years ago. And I just drove in with my complete naive and completely naive. And as I made it halfway and realizing that nothing had been built so far and it was literally a big desert, one man, a security officer in the quad, was following me, and that's when I realized, after a long speech, that I was not allowed to be here. And for anybody who planned to visit the construction site, you need to have your expo pass, such as the one shown here, and you can even have your permanent pass if you are invited by the contractor or if you have a reason to be there. And even for delivery of trailers, you have to have regular follow-up emails. You have to get the passes and approvals to be able to deliver material there. So this is probably the case with the most prestigious job sites here in the UAE, but it's definitely the case in Expo. Now, some requirements for plant and equipment, which, to be completely honest with you, is nothing out of the extraordinary. I mean, they follow the British standard. So all your tower cranes have to be regularly maintained, and they have to have the inspections after erection and after any modification, and every 6 months if you're lifting personnel. So there is nothing out of the unusual. However, any operation does take place with more scrutiny from the Expo and the clients, such as Dubai World Trade Center, and they have more of a watchful eye over any erection, any jacking operation. Where it doesn't really differ much from normal standards and conditions in the Expo, it does differ in, they do have unique requirements for the welfare of the employees. And it is really to show the reputation of the Middle East being a low-cost place to construct because of less safety and less welfare for the employees is no longer the case. And you can see in Expo today that any contractor who will work in any project in the Expo must be able to pass certain criteria, such as the laborers have to have at least 4 meters squared to be able to accommodate each resident, as opposed to the Dubai municipality, which is 3 meters squared. You also have to have a maximum 8 laborers per camp. They need to have access to a facility such as basketball courts, football pitch. All this has to be free of cost. They must have their food acknowledged based on their preferences and their cultural backgrounds. And that is really the key point for the welfare requirements of Expo, among many. You can see the list here. And of course, all the laborers have to be taken care of by a welfare manager who has regular visits from the Expo to check on these conditions. Now, what happens after Expo? Nagham will go in further detail about that.
Thank you, Nawar. This is a very detailed outlook as to why the Expo 2020 is very unique for the construction industry requirements, setting new standards. So going back to our main topic, what is the sentiment about Expo 2020? Again, here there's two split of feelings around the Expo 2020. The first segment on the left side are very optimistic about the Expo 2020. They believe that this event is going to take the UAE into a multi-dimensional economy, a move away from oil and a focus on other sectors that were previously not developed in the UAE. Also, another optimistic challenge behind the Expo 2020, optimistic driver, is the fact that there's going to be so much focus on entrepreneurship, and the UAE is going to become a hub for startups, and the Expo 2020 is further going to fuel that. Also, like I said, the rise in oil prices has allowed the government to revive a lot of the projects that were on hold for many years. So all in all, many customers believe that the Expo 2020 is the beginning of an era of new construction, new standards, new ways of doing construction. So this is one school of thought. On the other hand, you have the less optimistic bunch who believe that the challenges will continue even with the expo. Smaller margins, increased competition, increased cost, they're not going to go away. And there's so much uncertainty behind what happens after the Expo 2020. And I think the media is doing a very good job in calming those uncertainties by already talking about what's going to happen after the Expo. What about all these buildings that we're building? Are they going to stay or are we going to tear them down? And so the media is already starting to talk about life after April 2021 with District 2020, which is expected to open in October 2021, which is a whole new city around Expo 2020. Al Wasl Plaza is going to continue to host, it will become an office space. Actually, Siemens and Accenture have already took their space in that building, and it's going to be all powered through a 5 GB connection to keeping in line with that connecting minds, connecting the future. And a lot of the other buildings also have a lot of purpose because they're going to be next to the Maktoum Airport. Trade Center is no longer going to be where it is now. It's going to move to the Expo site. So all of this is to avoid the Brazil syndrome, where you have a lot of the World Cup stadiums and the Expo stadiums just like a ghost town. So there's a lot of emphasis on making sure Dubai is not like that, and Dubai continues to grow even after Expo 2020. But we won't know until we get there now, will we? So thank you very much.
Thank you, Naga. Thank you, Noah. Who's got a question for either of these guys? Okay, down in the middle here, please.
So thank you so much for this interesting presentation. And if you don't mind, can you get the slide back when you were talking about the four challenges for the Middle East market? And you were saying that it's a pity that quality is coming in the third position. What is very interesting, I think, from my perspective, is comparing the Middle East's market with other markets, like the North American market or the European market. So if you compare this now, for an example, to the American market, what they're doing is that they're putting more quality standards that every crane manufacturer or construction site must fulfill. Accordingly, quality is going up, and the importance of price or the positioning of price as a challenge is going lower than quality. In this case, if we apply this here in the Middle East area, governmental regulations can play an important role in increasing the importance of safety, for an example, and this will be much easier for competition, will lower competition, and at the same time will reduce the power of pricing. If you compare this, for an example, to the German market, where the government, again, is controlling the interest rates and trying to make it more interesting for construction companies to look for long-term investments. So in this case, you are pushing quality and after-sales service higher, and you're reducing the power of the pricing in this case. So I think that the government is playing an important role, and this must be also applied here in the Middle East area, controlling interest rates or, for an example, increasing the safety regulations per state, per area or per Gulf country. Each country has to design their own standards that in order to ensure the safety and to have a more safe and stable construction market. That's from my perspective. And it will be very more interesting if you can give us some percentages. What is the difference in percentages between price, quality, and safety?
So here it was mainly ranking, and the majority of our customers, and here, if I recall, because like I said, this was 2 years ago, 60% ranked price as number one, and then the rest was split between the other 9 factors. But thank you for saying that, because I agree, there has to be more focus on quality, and in European countries you have the CE standard, which is very reputable and very recognized, and they keep updating the standards every year. So there's actually a committee that's looking into tower crane and heavy equipment quality and standards. And I do believe that it's the regulations and the government support for that is the answer to allow, and also there's a culture around it that we need to look at in hopes to push for quality and, you know, put price a little bit more downwards. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Do you see any more hands anywhere?
No, I need to put my glasses.
Okay.
Okay.
You okay?
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Thank you, Nawar. Thank you, Nawar.